Today's episode of the Power Company podcast is brought to you by you.
Hey everybody, Chris here. Just a couple of notes on today's episode. First off, it's going to be a long one, so strap in and enjoy the ride. And second, you're going to want to stick around after it seems like the conversation might be over, because we reached out to Ben Moon and got his opinions on our conversation. Enjoy.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? What? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
All my life I've been a devil's advocate. I've been a devil's advocate. I've been a devil's advocate.
This time, 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 power, power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton, and I will be on the con side of today's conversation.
And I am Nathan Drolet, and I'll be on the pro side of the conversation today.
Today's Devil's Advocate topic, the moon board. About the moon board.
Nate, do you want to tell people what the moon board is? Specifically the people who don't have Instagram, Facebook, or any friends?
Yes. Yeah. If you don't have any sort of social media, then maybe it's possible you don't know what it is. So the moon board is a fixed wall. It's 40 degrees overhanging, and all of the holds on it are numbered and arrowed for specific degrees, so that every single person in the world who uses it can set all the holds in the exact same orientation as each other, and in the exact same position. That way, there can be a global community that uses the board.
And how does the global community know what everyone else is doing?
I think Instagram. Hashtags. So there's an app that goes along with it. And with the app, you can upload your own problems, and everyone else can upload their problems. So you can go through, set filters so that you can filter through the problems. And you can share your problems in your list with friends. And so even if you are climbing by yourself, you can still use other people's problems and more or less kind of climb with your friends.
Yeah, and I talked to Moon recently, and they said that the current set, because they change the set ever so often, has over 4,000 problems set by around 1,000 setters. And right now there's close to 8,000 active app users.
That's pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive. I wouldn't have guessed quite that many. But.
And I guess as far as some things go, so the app is relatively new. I'd say it's maybe only a year or a year and a half old.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Something like that. In the past, there were, I believe, 3 sets, and people would just kind of alternate over time, and you would just have to like print out the problems, more or less.
Right.
So it's really nice. The app now, they've completely gotten rid of the original 3 sets, and there's just one set that everyone uses now. And
does that change yearly, do you know?
They haven't changed it yet. Since the app, it's been the exact same.
Okay.
So I don't know when they're going to change it.
Okay.
But yeah, and so now it's one solid set, and it's kind of nice because a lot of people would have to like print out giant binders with all the problems printed out, and this makes it really nice. So yeah, that's the moon board.
Yeah, and I also talked to Ben about some specific advances they were going to make, like where they're going next. I was curious what he was going to do from here, and he told me that they are going to be changing the set, and it will fill all 198 hold placements on the board. So there's no open holes like there are now.
Okay. Is that like, I mean, that's what, another like 50 holds or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to include a new range of 50 resin holds as well as 30 to 40 wooden holds.
Oh, wow.
Is what he told me. So I don't know why they're mixing it up, but they are. He's also working on, which I think this part is kind of cool, even though I'm on the con side of the argument today, on a strength and fitness assessment tool so that you can assess yourself on the moon board, and working on an interval timer for the LED system that comes with the board, which we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah, which is actually pretty cool. It's an LED system. There are little LED lights that sit maybe 2 inches under, well, no, probably about 4 inches under every T-nut. But with the hold, it looks like it's about maybe 2 inches under every single hold.
Yeah.
And I got to say, first time I saw a video, I was like, this is just a stupid gimmick. Like, it seemed really silly. And then the first time I actually used one, it's pretty rad. Just to be able to like swipe through the problems really fast and like have the LEDs immediately sync. So the way the LED system works is it's synced through Bluetooth from your phone to the board itself.
Right. And the way the interval timer is going to work is that, as I understand it, is that you can set the intervals. So if you want the problem to change to another specific problem every minute or whatever, it can switch the problem and just automatically highlight it for you.
Nice.
So moonboarding for dummies. That's what it is.
And it is nice because that's one thing that can be tough. You get pretty quick at, when you've used the moonboard a lot, like looking over the boulders and memorizing which holds are which, because there's obviously no tape. But it is really nice having the LED lights so you can just go to a new problem instead of having to sit there and memorize which holds or have a friend yell them at you.
Yep.
There's lights right below them, so makes it a little quicker. And yeah, what I thought was definitely really gimmicky to start, I was pretty impressed with.
Oh, cool. I haven't used the LED system, so that's cool to hear that. They're also working on a 25-degree board. I don't know if it's going to be a separate board or just a separate set, or if it's going to be the same set just at 25 degrees and they have different grades for every problem. But I do think it's interesting that they're switching the board degree.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think it makes sense. Not every boulder in the world is 40 degrees.
Yeah, it's true. Like 2 of them, actually.
2.
No.
Most routes are not.
No, definitely not. And you guys may have seen this out there on the interwebs, but there is a new freestanding moonboard that has hit the airwaves, and it's powder-coated steel frame, and then it's the same moonboard setup with LEDs. You can switch it from 40 degrees, which is the standard angle, or 25 degrees, which is going to be one of the new angles. And that one costs, I can't even read this big number. It's with pads, it's $12,642. And without pads, $8,960. That's pre-shipping. And I don't know how much shipping of a powder-coated steel-framed moonboard costs, but it's got to be a little bit. But it's a really cool idea. So
yeah,
I'll be interested to see where that one goes.
For sure. And that one can shift between the 25 and the 40, correct?
Yeah. Yep. That one can go just to those 2 degrees. I don't think it can be in between. So
I didn't see that, but yes.
Yeah, just the 40 and the 25 is how I understand it. How many moonboards would you guess are in the U.S.?
I think I nerdy know the answer.
Did I tell you the answer?
You told me, but I'll tell you, my initial guess I think was around 300.
Yeah, that's about what I would have guessed too, 300 to 400. Ben says that based on holds sold, there are over 1,000 moonboards in the U.S. right now. So,
which is crazy to think about.
There's a lot of you guys out there.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're all listening to this episode.
Right now.
Personal experience.
A couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I spent about 6 months training on a moonboard. I was training on it 1 day a week. Specifically, I wanted to get better at tic-tacky, straightforward crimp climbing. Like hard tension moves, small tweaky holds, and this seemed like a great tool for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I focused on. 1 day a week, I would go into the gym, warm up. I would typically warm up for maybe like 30 minutes or so on the moonboard using the hold sets A and B, which are like kind of larger holds, fairly positive. And then I'd set a timer for an hour. And for that 1 hour, I would just session hard on only the original holds, which are like the small yellow ones.
Right.
Really tweaky, but kind of in a way that feels similar to climbing outside. And I would just only climb on that set. And then I'd cool down, and that would be my one session for the week. This was back before the app existed. So the only problems I had access to were ones that were printed out in a binder. So
right.
maybe had access to, there were a lot of problems at the time, but I think we maybe had 100 in the book.
Gotcha.
that we had.
Where was that board at?
That was at High Point Climbing and Fitness in Chattanooga.
Okay. I
that's
didn't
not-
realize they had one that long ago. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, and it's not where I've always trained, but at the time I was doing some restaurant work, and I could only train early in the mornings, and so I was climbing at that gym, and that's also what spurred me to start climbing on the moon board. Was they had it at this gym, and so that's where I started climbing.
Okay. Cool.
But
And then you've climbed on it since then.
I have. I've climbed on it since the app has come out. And so I've gotten to kind of experience that. And it was kind of neat too. I got to go back even before the app came out. I got to keep climbing on it over the next year afterwards. And I could come back and check out the boulders I had trained on. And so it was kind of nice having a check-in spot,
Yeah.
like a metric of sorts, to be able to say like, okay, like, well, this boulder was really hard for me last year, but it feels easier now. And this one, like I used to be able to circuit every day as a warm up, and now it's like, oh, kind of strenuous.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool kind of having like a preset thing.
So even before the app, it was the board you were training on was at the same set, like the same wall configuration that ended up being the one for the app.
No, this was still before the app came out.
Oh, okay.
So I trained on
gotcha.
it, and then it was like the full next year later, which was still before the app came out.
Oh, got ya.
So it would have been like 2 years ago. I got to do that. And then even since the app came out, like I trained a little bit on that when it first came out, and then a full year later. So just recently I got to climb on it again, and it was kind of neat getting to check in and still have like, somewhat permanent boulders to try. 'Cause, that doesn't really happen indoors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to have in your training.
But yeah, so that's more or less my experience on it. I really wanted to just get better at straightforward crimp boulders, and so that's what I used it for.
Yeah, my experience is much, much less than that. I initially looked into getting a moon board for the engine room when I was building it 6 years ago, I guess, 5 years ago, something like that, and wasn't able to get a hold of one. And I actually reached out to Moon's U.S. rep, and he told me there was almost no way to get it at that point.
Wait, to get the holds? Or?
The holds.
Okay.
Yeah. That they just didn't have them, and it was hard to get a hold of them over here. So I abandoned that idea. And we didn't have quite the space, and we were trying to work out how to fit it in if we did. And we couldn't really come up with what the best option was to shorten the board, so to speak. So we abandoned that idea. And then since it got more popular, I've climbed on it just a tiny bit here and there. And it always felt like something that I needed to be in shape for. like climbing on the moon board was its own special thing. And if I was in shape to climb, thuggy roof climbing, I could get on the moon board and get nowhere in a session because it was just too hard. So I haven't spent a ton of time on it. And just haven't had one at my disposal because since it started to get really popular, I've been traveling a ton. But I have climbed in that same system of permanent boulders that you can climb on over a long period of time. And I really do like that system. So I've spent a lot of time with that.
Topic number 1, the moon board's effectiveness as a training tool.
All right. Hit me with your first one.
First one is that it's simple, and it's easy to focus on the basics. So a big beef that I have with gym climbing is a lot of times, I won't say things are overly complicated, but every single boulder might have like 3 toe hooks and 4 heel hooks and all these different things. It's a lot of trickery, which, I mean, it's really good to have those skills, but it's not that often that you just have in the gym straightforward, hard pulling, like you're just towing down and you're just moving between the holds. A lot of times there's always some sort of trick to it. And holds are very large and bulbous, so you can like get bicycles and all these weird things.
Yep.
And I really like that on the moon board. The way it climbs is, you have, start holds, handful of holds, and every time you move up, like your footholds are only the base at the kicker, like the kicker board at the very bottom, and after that you're tracking feet. So you're very limited on hands and feet, and it's just a matter of like pulling hard between holds. So it's very simple. Like I really like that you get to just break down and just move between holds, and it's not like, oh, well, I just didn't see this inverted drop knee Egyptian bicycle thing.
Right.
Like,
Yep, I could see that. And the current gyms are definitely moving more and more toward like World Cup style setting, and
which is a ton of fun.
yeah, super fun. Yeah, I have zero problem with it as its own thing, but it doesn't really set you up very well for hard crimping up a steep boulder. You know? So yeah, I could see that. I think I like the simplicity of it as well, but in response to that, I think that its simplicity is sort of part of its problem, because while someone like you who's really aware of what they're doing while they climb and can focus on doing a move a specific way rather than just the easiest way to do it to learn, most people are just going to jump from hold to hold or stay on the big starting feet for as long as they can and then just jump to the next hold. So I think its simplicity sort of rewards being really, really jumpy. And, I don't know that that's the best way to train. So that's my beef with its simplicity.
And that is fair. That's actually one thing that I do have a little bit of an issue with. And it's tough. It depends just on like, I guess how strong your fingers are and like how hard you're climbing.
Yep.
One issue I ran into is everything that's, I won't say everything, but like a lot of the boulders that are 7C and harder, so V9, man, for the most part, if you're staying on not the original holds, but the other two sets, it's just jumping. Like, I mean, I'm only 5'7", but I've got a pretty wide wingspan. And man, that's one of the main reasons I only started climbing on the yellow holds, was because the other ones just felt like jumping for every single move. And I feel like, yeah, if you're climbing in a commercial gym in the United States, like you're pretty good at jumping to good holds. Like, that's just the common setting style.
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely in the minority that jumping is not easy for me. So, and the people who love jumping aren't getting a whole lot out of the jumpy problems on the moon board. So. And one other issue I have with its simplicity is that it's maybe too simple. There are no slopers. Even though the website claims slopers, there really aren't any slopers. There are some slopey holds, but I definitely wouldn't call them slopers. So I have an issue with that for sure as a complete training tool.
Yes. Yeah. As a well-rounded, complete training tool for everything, I think that's a fair statement.
Yep.
Yeah. So you want me to just keep going through my bullets here?
Yeah.
All right. So my next one is that you can have unchanging long-term projects. You can have metric boulders. And also this is an interesting one, that comes from a guy trained metric circuits. So,
okay. Explain.
So that's more, he was doing a variation on 4x4s where you're using very, very hard boulders and very long rest times. And it was kind of cool for him to be able to say, oh, I could link like these 4 V8s back to back with, only 5 to 10 seconds of rest in between. That's where I was at the beginning of the season. And then at the end of the season, I could take them all up a number and do harder boulders or like,
Okay, gotcha.
And by doing that, he could know like, oh, well, if my route outside has like 4 back-to-back V6s, if I can do 4 back-to-back V8s on this, like I'm going to go out and crush it. So it's kind of neat. Like that was just a second little thing. But yeah, like I really like the idea of having long-term projects or long-term things you can come back to in the gym and look at, because not everyone has access to climbing outside in good weather year round.
Yep. And I agree completely that having access to training boulders for a long period of time is hugely important. And I wrote about this on the blog a long time ago concerning the what was the problem that Daniel Woods did at Cats?
The bubble wrap.
The bubble wrap project, yeah. And talking about the importance of the bubble wrap project. And because of that, I love spaces like Cats that is just, littered with holds, problems everywhere, just a binder of problems or whatever. In this case, it's an app. So I like that. I don't think it has to be on a moon board, though. I think it can be, it can be any wall and any holds. And if you set it up with other holds, you can have a wider variety. So I agree with you on the concept for sure. I just don't think the moon board is the best tool for that specific idea.
Okay. What you would be like, let's say someone's at home, they're like, hey, I want to build a home wall and I want to have all my own holds, and they just decide they're going to build something ground up, blank slate. What would you recommend?
I think it would be different for every person. Just really depends on
That's fair. Yeah, what their goals are. And
what their goals are and their strengths and weaknesses. And if their weaknesses are jumps to crimps, then build yourself a moon board for sure. If you're really good at jumps to crimps and you want to spray about it on a moon board, then do that too. But it's not going to help you nearly as much. So, that's my thought.
Okay. All right. So next one I have is that the board is really short, which I really like. And so it forces you to focus on really brief, difficult sequences. Like even the really long moon board boulders are like maybe 6 moves long, but a lot of them are, 4 and 5 moves long. This kind of goes back to commercial gyms in the United States. Like, man, walls are just getting
bigger,
so
and bigger.
tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary tall.
Yeah. Like 16 feet. That's messed up, man. Yeah. But yeah, so, you're climbing these little mini routes in the gym a lot of the time, just these huge power endurance line where every single move is roughly as hard as the last one.
Right.
And so it's kind of cool to have this where it's just like 4 piss hard moves and like, yeah. And also they're just a lot of times kind of awkward.
Yep.
Especially the old sets. Like now that like people are uploading their own, like they're getting a little more ergonomical, which I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Kind of like the awkward tweaky things.
Yeah. You would.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, it forces you into things you wouldn't normally do. But
okay.
Yeah, I'm just a fan that it is something short and difficult.
Yep. I agree. I think that's a really good thing about it. I'm glad it's not bigger than it is. Size-wise anyway, because it's plenty big enough on Instagram. But yeah, I really like the short, difficult part of it. I have heard from, I talked to a bunch of our mutual friends who've spent a lot of time on moon boards or around them, and one of the complaints I have heard most often is that, especially with the current set, a lot of the problems start sitting and on fairly large holds, so that by the time you're 2 moves in or a move in, you can high step up to a big foothold and then kind of ride the foothold through the problem. So you're no longer doing really hard foot movements or holding small feet with your feet. So that would be, its shortness with it starting on big holds sort of creates that situation. So
yeah, no, and that's totally fair. That is actually one of my criticisms of it is that, man, all the holds are fairly positive. They might be facing the wrong way, but even if they're facing the wrong way, you can smear on top of them and it's not a bad foot. So yeah, they are very positive, like big holds. And if you're strong with your legs and you're really good at just like driving through your legs, it makes the boulder significantly easier.
Yep, gotcha.
Also can be tough. Like, so there's a base kicker board. I think it's maybe a foot tall at the very bottom. And then when you're climbing, because that's an open set of feet, you don't get another foothold till the start hold. So if your start hold's not another like 3 feet above those, there's this massive 3 foot gap of, you paddle up your hands as far as you can go while reaching on the kicker board.
Hold the swing.
Hold a swing or do a jump, and then you're like tagging the start hold, which sometimes is a jug. It's not unoften that it's a fairly decent hold.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a completely fair criticism that there aren't really like bad small footholds on the board.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's more or less what I have. Otherwise, I have that there are lots of options. I mean, 4,000 boulders.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if I feel like that's a pro or a con, but I have
a lot of the moves are going to end up similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that, having that variety is pretty amazing, really.
Yeah. If nothing else, it is very impressive.
Yeah. So we covered one of mine for sure, that it lends itself to a particular style. But also I think that, and this is sort of a complaint with the LED system and with the, being fed boulder problems all the time. And this is a problem with commercial gyms as well, in my opinion, unless they just have a wall littered with holds that you can make up your own problems on, is that a really important part of deliberate practice and learning any skill is building mental representations of how those skills work, and if you never really have to experiment with beta because it's just essentially fed to you, then you're never going to build those mental representations. It's almost, not quite, okay, yeah, it's not even almost, but it's sort of somewhat similar to having the spray lord in the gym who tries to give you the beta every time you step on the wall. So I definitely have that beef with it, that it's these 4 holds, you're going to do it this way. You've already done a similar move off of this hold to the one right next to the one you're going to now. So you kind of always know the beta.
Well, that's fair. I will say this, though, where I feel like it falls short on root reading and beta finding, that's where I actually think it shines to a degree, because I like to think of it as kind of a constructive constraint. Like, by eliminating searching for beta, you say, okay, like, I have this one hand, I have this one foot, and I'm going to that hold. How do I position myself and my body, and how do I regulate my tension and all of that to get to the next move? So it really distills.
You jump.
Every time. Jump and post it to Instagram.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
But, I mean, that said, it's like you kind of nailed it, though. Like, a lot of these moves you can just blindly jump through. If you're not thinking about it, you can just approach it like a campus board, really. And then it's like, I mean, at that point, are you training or are you climbing? Like,
yeah, and the whole, I agree with what you said. I hadn't really thought of it like that as a constructive constraint, but maybe it's a constructive constraint for people at a specific level. Like, after you're already a V8 climber or something, you can start to focus on these things, but below that level, and that's totally a random level off the top of my head.
For sure, yeah.
But below that, you've still got a ton more to gain from learning new movements and learning to memorize beta and figure out beta and things like that. Figure out those things on your own. And, V8's probably a little far along. It's probably more like the V6 level. You could get some real benefit from just focusing on the difficulty and not so much on figuring it out.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a skill to being overwhelmed by beta and options and being able to simplify from there and say, like, okay, I've seen this work before, I've seen this work before. These 2 options, like, I don't know if they'll work, but I'll try them out. And then the rest I know shouldn't work. Being able to do that kind of thing, like, that's very much a skill, especially when climbing outside, because it is, especially with footholds, and just like very minute options, you normally have a ton of options to choose from.
Yep.
And it's a matter of like, okay, what will work, and like, I'll test what might work, and knowing what will and what won't and what's worth even trying out. I think it's a very valuable skill.
Yep. So probably, I think what we're saying there is that it's a really good physical training tool in that respect. But if you're still in those early stages of learning about beta and movement, then maybe it's not the best thing. And, at that point, maybe you can't even use it really. There aren't very many easy boulders on the moonboard.
I think the easiest one is V3-ish.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And my final con for the moonboard as a training tool is sort of a beef with the app, and the way it's being used, in that topping boulders out is still just climbing. And I think that having the app and being able to search for the boulders that you can do, which is frankly what most people are doing. They want success. They want to be able to post it to Instagram. They look for things they can do. They film themselves doing it. At that point, you're not necessarily training anymore. Once you can do a boulder, most people aren't being aware enough and focusing on the details of what they're doing while they're climbing for it to be training. Then it's just climbing. And honestly, any wall is a poor substitute for just climbing. That's not a knock on the moon board at all. That's just a knock on thinking that you're going climbing when you're going to the climbing gym.
I guess I have a question on how you're using the word training. Would you do you view the moon board more for training or for practice?
Either way, I think I'm using the word sort of interchangeably right now. And I think that either way, if you're just topping boulders out, then that's not necessarily, it's definitely not physical training. And for most people, it's not going to be practice either. So,
yeah, I mean, that's completely fair. I think that's just that's actually one of my things I have written down, because I wrote pros and cons just because. But when it comes down to it, it's a tool.
Yep, totally.
It doesn't make you instantly a better climber or anything like that. It is what you make it to be. Like, if you're a person who just goes into the gym and you just like to climb volume, you're going to get on this board and you can say, oh, cool, 4,000 boulders. Like, I'm just going to keep doing like 20 new boulders a day. And it's going to be no different than if you did that on a regular wall or outside or whatever. Like, same thing, people who only like to project, they never actually have volume. They only try 2-3 things.
Right.
Actually, one thing that I think it can be detrimental for, if people aren't aware of it, are the people who will try something hard and they say, that's too difficult, I'm going to do something else. And they can just keep swiping through boulders till they find something in their style.
Right, yep.
It's funny, a buddy of mine, Jeremy, told me the other day. So last time I was in Chattanooga, we were talking and he was like, yeah, I want to try and do all the V8s on the app. And at the time when he first started, there were 400. And when he hit 250, which he was doing them fairly quickly, when he hit 250, there were 404 left. And he was just like, bump this, I'm going V9.
You could do it forever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's endless. And so the thing is, you could very easily just keep going through and be like, oh no, this is difficult, like, because I have to try hard, but it's not going to make you, they could be things that you're not actually going to grow from, or you actually have to like focus on or be intentional with, because there are so many.
That's something I hadn't really thought about, that I also think is, a knock against it. And you basically just laid it out, but I've had this issue with commercial gyms as well, who change their setting really often. It's a great idea for your clientele to get new boulders that keeps people coming back in, but it also traps people at a specific grade a lot of times, where they come in, there are all these new boulders this week, and they spend their nights climbing all the V6s because that's the highest level they can do in a session, and they climb them all, and then they come back the next week and there's a whole new wall with all new V6s, and they go session all those for the night, and then they come back the next week and it's the same thing over and over and over.
Oh yeah, I've seen this everywhere. Like, in weekly turnovers, pretty cool. Like, I mean,
I have no issue with it, other than if you can get trapped in it.
Yes, it's very easy to. I mean, because you want to go climb on new boulders. Like, why not?
Yeah.
And that's something I actually caught myself doing. This was years ago when I was still living in Chattanooga all the time, and I would actually just start skipping sets. Because I was training at TBA and they would set weekly, and I'd be like, okay, I've got like my projects on the 45-degree wall. So when they would set the next wall, I would go in and, like, for my warm-ups, I would do those boulders and like slowly work up, but I would then go back and project the 45-degree wall. And then when 2 weeks later, when the next wall got set, I would work on that. Because otherwise I would just.
I did something really similar in the gym. Same thing. And it's great because everyone migrates over to the new wall, and you're left at the old wall by yourself, and it's all for you.
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
I hadn't thought of that. You could very easily get trapped in a grade in the moon board for eternity.
Yeah. I mean, and I, obviously just because it's easy to do that doesn't mean it like forces anyone into that. I just think it's, it's a pothole to be aware of. Like, it's like, okay, like, I'm not going to allow myself to only climb on things that look great to me. Like, it might even be like, oh, like, first I'm going to do like 3 boulders that look awful. I look at this and I'm like, God, this is terrible. And then, like, I have a fun boulder. I'm like, yes, I'm going to flash this boulder. Perfect.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's it's definitely a valid tool, but like any other tool, you can definitely use it incorrectly. So let's go ahead and take a break.
All right.
What's up, everybody? Chris here. Pardon the interruption. I'll keep this short and sweet. Since this podcast started taking off and we've been growing it, you guys have been asking how you can help out. I've got 3 ways for you. Number 1, you can become a patron. That just means you give a monthly donation to the podcast, $1 and up, and you get something in return. And you can check out what those rewards are at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. Best of all, we'll keep it sponsor and commercial free for you. Number 2, you can rate us and review us on iTunes. I know it's a pain in the ass to go to iTunes and do all that, but it really helps us out. At least that's what I'm told by the podcast powers that be. And number 3, perhaps the easiest way and the best way to help us out is to share us on your social medias. Anytime you see us post up a new podcast, please share it with your friends. Tag people who will really appreciate it or who need to hear the advice that we're giving. All right, thank you guys, and back to the show.
Topic number 2, pros and cons of the moonboard for the home user.
All right. So I'll go ahead and start with the pros. First off, the community. Just if you're climbing alone, like climbing alone's tough, and the fact that you can have that community support's pretty awesome, or maybe not support, but just the fact that you can have all these different boulders to cycle through. Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing.
That is pretty cool, unless you're like me and you don't like people. No, actually, I really do think that's a really cool part of it. And I hadn't given that part nearly as much credit until I was recently talking to Jay Wu, one of the guys in the Shrine crew over in Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how they all share their moonboard problems, and Joe Kinder was jumping in with them and sharing moonboard problems back and forth from California, and just that they would all get so psyched on it. And that's a really cool aspect of it I hadn't really thought about. I think because the moonboards that I had seen were like tucked away in the middle of nowhere, where all those folks just climb with each other and that's it. Mm-hmm. Like they're their own little entities, and there isn't going to be any sharing with the outside world anyway. So that's kind of how I had seen it. So yeah, I think you're right. Begrudgingly, I think you're right.
So my second one, this is simply from practical standpoint of having your own home wall. It's a simple decision. And I think you can kind of have that opinion of it's good enough. So like a lot of times, if you're looking at like how earlier I mentioned, what would you put on a wall? For a lot of people, it's like, okay, if I'm setting my own wall, what angle should it be at? What holds should I use? Should I use different companies? What kind of grips? Right. And it becomes overwhelming to the point to where even when you could have a beautiful, amazing wall, and the whole time you can be like, but could I make it better? Like if you're always second guessing things, like you're not going to worry about your training as much. Like you're like, oh, but should I be getting like the new Technic pinches, or maybe, some Kingdom holds? I don't know. But this is nice because you're just like, hey, it's going to work. Like I can just put this up. I don't have to think about that anymore. Like it is just checking a box. Yep.
I think you're right there. And I hadn't really thought about that too much either, largely because I'm definitely a DIY kind of guy, and I like to make my own choices. And honestly, and one of my bullet points goes to this, that it's, definitely a little bit expensive. And maybe you're right. Maybe that expense is they're taking all the decision making out of it. So maybe that's part of it. But for me, the fact that it's a little over $800 just to get the holds here to the U.S. that's a little much for me. So
yeah, that's fair. All right, and my last bullet point on this one is that you don't have to set your own boulders. I think that's really important. Especially what I feel like happens to a lot of people, and I've been a route setter for a long time, like off and on, and I can say that whenever I was setting boulders for myself, even if I thought I was setting things that were outside of my style, it would be outside of my style in a way that I was comfortable with.
Yep.
Like everything always, the footholds were always facing the correct direction. Like, there was nothing tweaky or weird. Everything was oriented in a way that like fit my body very nicely. So even if I thought it was out of my style, like everything fit me beautifully. Like, 'cause why would you intentionally set something that feels awkward?
Sure.
So I think a lot of people end up setting to their strengths, even if they don't realize it. And so they just reinforce what they've already got without really developing anything new.
Yep. I think that's certainly true. I think that it's really hard to set outside of your comfort zone. You can get just on the outside edges, but it's really hard to go way out of your comfort zone. It's something I've tried for a long, long time. And we remedied that with the wall in the engine room was just holds kind of everywhere. And then everybody would collaborate and set their own problems, really similar to how the moon board works. The holds are put up there, they're staying in that configuration. You just pick out your path through them, and I think that can work as well if you have a few friends who are climbing on your wall with you, both stronger and not as strong. My one argument with the, you don't have to set your own problems, so that gets you out of your comfort zone, is that I think two things. One is user error, because I think the people who really want a moon board are the people who really climb in that style, the more jumpy latch holds kind of style. And I think that you eventually get used to those holds and that style. And, there's only so many ways you can do those moves and use those footholds from that angle, so after 6 months of climbing on the board, when it stays the same and you're just doing everyone else's problems, you're using all those holds in the same ways over and over and over and over. So if it was more dense, if there were a lot more holds on the wall and you had a lot more options, I think I'd be happier with it. But I think you get used to that style because it's such a specific style pretty quickly.
I will agree with that as far as style goes. And this was something you had mentioned earlier. You were talking about how you feel like you needed to be in moonboard shape to climb on the moonboard.
Yeah, totally.
It reminds me of campus boarding, in that after a handful of sessions, you really like get back in the groove of campus boarding. You're like, oh, that's right. Like I remember how to like drive with both hands at the same time and how to like hit engaged and all these things.
Yep.
A lot of times moonboarding, I feel like is very similar in that, because a lot of the holds, and this is something, it's one of the reasons that drove me to the moonboard initially. All the holds are like fairly small, or not small, but you grab them all as crimps really. Even like the pinches and like flat edges, they all have very positive thumbs. So even when you're pinching something, your fingers are in a half crimp or like a full crimp position.
Gotcha.
So they're always you're always grabbing very aggressively. It's not that often that you're fully open handing anything, or like, or grabbing anything like a sloper really. Like everything has such a positive thumb. So you're really like crimping down, crimp pinching super hard. So it is a very specific, somewhat narrow style, like, which at the time, that's exactly what I wanted, because that's what I wanted to get better at. But I agree, like, you get good at jumping to positive in cut edges.
Yep, totally.
That was all my bullet points for positives.
Okay. One of my probably my biggest negative,
I already know where you're going with this,
against it is something I've sort of already mentioned about. We thought about it in the engine room, is that it, for most homeowners, it just doesn't fit in their space very well.
It's a 10.5 foot wall.
Right.
Do you know how expensive it is to heat 10.5 foot ceilings?
Oh man, I hadn't even thought about that. God, how do you keep your moonboard room warm or cool in the summer, for God's sake?
Yeah.
How do you keep sending temps in the moonboard room? No, it's, a lot of people have 8 foot tall ceilings and it just doesn't quite fit. And I think that leaves us with this quandary that when looking online and reading people's blogs about their moonboards, everyone has tried to solve this in a different way. And there really isn't a good way.
There's also not a uniform way, which is kind of ironic for a uniform board.
Right, exactly.
And it is funny, too, that if you Google moonboard, the first thing that pops up is maybe, I don't know, like 40 online forums of Okay.
How do you adjust it for the height of a normal house?
Yeah, my walls aren't tall enough. My wife won't let me cut a hole in the ceiling or dig out the floor. What do I do? But that is what's funny is there's not really like a unified answer.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe we should try and get that.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I know on Andrew Bisharat's board, he took out one of the foot rows, so he like halved the kicker board on the bottom, I believe.
I think it was different than that.
Maybe that's what he wished he would have done.
Yeah, I think that's what he said he wished he would have done. And I think what he did is he scaled the whole thing down slightly.
Yes.
Which surprisingly, and I guess if you think about it hard enough, you would come up with this answer. But initially you would think, oh, that just makes everything easier. Mm-hmm. But not quite. Sometimes it makes things harder, and so it's tricky because all those grades that are in the app no longer apply. You have no idea.
Sense.
Yeah, you have no idea which side of the spectrum you're falling on at this point, other than your own intuition. And that's the whole point of what you're trying to get away from here. Is you want something with unified grades that you can understand.
Yeah, so that whole shared experience. I will say also one thing that I really liked from that Bisharat did on his wall was he used the chalkboard paint.
Yep.
Which is nice. Like it's a nice substitute for the LED.
One of the guys we work with, Tyler, has done the same thing with his moon board.
Yeah, I like that. So that way, instead of having to use tape or anything, you just use chalk. Yep. So you can mark all your holds really quickly. I thought that was a really nice idea.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's a good idea. That's my biggest gripe, I think, with the moon board. I wish they would have scaled it to fit into a normal person's home. Mm-hmm. But also, if it's, most home wall users have space and money to build a wall, and this is the one they choose. And for me, that becomes problematic when the style is so narrow. And I know it sounds like I'm harping on the style at this point, but not necessarily. I think it's more of it's not efficient for the home user because it's just this one limited style. So if you're going to a commercial gym as well and you get slopers and you get big, powerful, dynamic compression moves and, you also get, tiny little feet that you can climb on, things like that, then great. Put a moon wall at your house. If you're if you're a Chattanooga climber and most of your time is spent on sandstone slopers, then the wall you put in your spare room should maybe not be a moon wall. If that's what most of your goals revolve around sandstone slopers, then maybe that's not the wall you should be training on.
But do you think there's value in climbing on a different style than what you always?
Definitely. If depends on your goals, if your goal is to send the orb and you choose to train on the moon board, you may never reach your goal. Or you can just crimp your way through the slopers.
I've seen that done.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe Skeletor at horse pens. I could see the orb being done with a moon board training, but Skeletor might be a little harder.
Yeah. Everything at horse pens might be a little harder.
Yeah, Skeletor is just heinous.
That's really all I got. We talked about the price already. I think that's a little bit off-putting. Mm-hmm. I think you can order some really great, for about the same price, you can get tensions wood holds, and those are going to be much friendlier on your skin, and they're just really, really nice holds. And you can get a full wall set of those for the same price you can get the moon holds for. So
yeah, and I mean, especially depending on what your normal schedule looks like. I mean, skin's really important.
Yep.
I know, especially climbing on only the original holds, up until a week ago, I had only ever split a tip once in my entire life.
Before you went a little too far with drying agents?
Yeah, I went a little too hard with antihydral. And I'd only ever split a tip, like my actual pad, once. I've split seams before, but those are just, they kind of happen. And it was on a moon board. Yeah,
really?
Projecting a Ben Moon 6C, which is roughly V5.
Oh, see what you did, Ben.
Yeah. It was I don't think I ever sent it either.
Well, just for your future reference, the Power Company podcast has an episode with rhino skin, and you should go listen to that.
I will. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, they are sharp. And so by having more comfortable holds, or you can file your holds down. I know that's something you always did for the engine room.
Yep.
So it might be worth filing them down and just making
sand
them,
off the sharpness.
making them a little more climbable.
Yep. And you like sharp holds, so.
Yeah, I love them normally.
Yeah, not me, man.
Topic number 3, pros and cons of the trending popularity. #Moonboard.
First off, and you already kind of mentioned this, people are psyched on it, man.
Yeah, they are.
Like-
They're so psyched on it.
Yeah. I mean,
I wish there were a way on Instagram to block certain hashtags, because I would definitely block #Moonboard. Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome that people are stoked on it. I just don't really care what you're bouldering on inside, so I'm a little sick of it.
that's fair. But it keeps people psyched. And there's a lot of people who live in shitty places who just can't climb outside. And man,
No doubt.
if you're staying psyched and healthy and amped to train, get after it.
Yeah, I really can't argue with that. I mean, it's been really fun watching training kind of blow up. When I first started the blog about training, it just wasn't very popular, and it's gotten more and more and more popular. And I mean, Ben's helping me essentially. I mean, that's how we're making our living. So, him helping training get more popular is just helping us. So
Yeah.
I really can't argue that there's anything wrong with it being popular.
All right. So number 2 that I have, and this one's a little bit of a dig to make this happen, but
You're reaching already. Huh?
yeah. The other 2 are better. So the next one, videotaping yourself. A lot of people don't do this, and it's actually really beneficial.
Shit, there's a pro to that?
I know.
I hadn't even thought of this.
So obviously, like, there are 3 different ways that people learn: kinesthetically, visually, and
Audibly?
audibly. I don't know why that was hard. So kinesthetically, like, obviously, if you go through a move and you say, okay, I now feel it. Like, these are people who might do really well with power spots,
Right.
or simulating
Right.
a move with a bigger foot, different hand, something like that.
Yep.
Once they can feel it, they're like, okay, I can replicate this. Then audibly, if someone says, hey, like, keep your hips in, or like really get your hips over your ankle, or like pull down hard with your pulling hand, they respond well to that. But some people are really great visual learners, and I've realized that I'm actually one of them. So for me, if I watch someone else do a move, I can almost always replicate it.
Yeah.
Or even more importantly, if I have video of myself climbing, I can pick apart things so much faster than just naturally feeling it or hearing someone else say something. I can't believe I'm even saying it, but yeah, so all these people posting videos of themselves climbing on Instagram, they have to watch themselves climb, and they're just, they're like, oh, wow, you're actually like picking apart what you're doing, because you want to look like you're climbing better. You want to climb better. So that's what I got. It's actually a pro somehow.
Yeah, I could see it as a pro that way, specifically for people videoing themselves and then rewatching it to analyze their own performance, if they're doing that. I think most people just post it up and then watch how many times it's been viewed. I think that's more important. But I think there is something of an issue that I have with the ability to have essentially beta videos for your indoor training problems.
I see nothing ridiculous about that.
I mean, I get it for outdoor climbing. If you want to get something done fast, you go. I mean, I was at the fucking aircraft carrier the other day.
Had to walk out on top to get
searching.
service.
I walked up on top to look for a video for Kat and Kate, so they could know exactly how to set the knee bar and which hand movements to make, because my method didn't work for them. And so I walked to the top of the damn cliff to get service so I could watch the video and shout beta down to them below.
I'm going to have to give them so much shit now. They didn't mention this at all.
Oh, it was awesome. But so I get it in that situation. I don't think I like it for indoors in a training or practice environment, because then it becomes performing. And I think performing is not exactly the opposite of training, but it's pretty damn close.
It's definitely on one really far end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like I'd say it's on the opposite end of the spectrum of practice.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I guess I hadn't really thought about that as much. Yeah, it's completely fair. I think, you should have a practice mindset with these kind of things. All right. So that was my kind of shenanigans one. So next one I've got, I actually really like this one. It was, from talking with Juliet Hammer, who was here recently. You recorded the podcast with her.
Yep.
So she had mentioned she was using the moon board. So I grilled her about it so that I could have some ammo for this. And so she's tiny. I think maybe 5 foot even.
Yeah. She's a little thing.
Yeah. Fairly powerful climber.
With all the powers.
Yeah. But she was saying one thing she loved about it is that as a small female, she could go on Instagram, find other small females.
Yeah.
And then she could message them and say, hey, send me your project list, or like send me your list of
that's cool.
Yeah, of things that like you've done successfully, so that she could have things. Because
so she doesn't have to go through all the things that are just way too reachy.
Yeah, 4,000 boulders. And I mean, the thing is, like, I have so much respect for small females in climbing. Like,
oh yeah, definitely. Especially this season here in Waco. Shit.
Yeah.
There's so many little girls just crushing everything, including all my hopes and dreams.
Yes. But it's awesome. Like, to me, they're some of the most creative climbers, because they have to be. Like, they don't have the option of just thugging through things. So they're so creative and, man, so tenacious. It's been awesome, especially, this season, getting to see so many of these women out here. And, man, they pick, like, fucked up hard boulders. And they'll be like, one day they crush a V9. They're like, I'm going to go project that V6 for the next 3 days because I know that's not my style. It's going to make me better. And I'm just like, fuck that. That sounds hard.
That's something I'm really impressed by these girls around here, is that, like Kat, for instance, does a V11 and, in her own cynical way, downgrades it to V5.
Yeah.
But then we'll go and claim that the V4 is impossible, but she'll spend days and days on the V4 trying to make it work.
Yeah.
Figure out a way to get through the gigantic move that she just can't possibly span. So it's pretty cool.
I just skip those things and call them bullshit. I'm just like, no, that thing's stupid, probably broke. I don't know. If I'm wearing the wrong shoes, my skin's bad.
Your skin is bad.
But yeah, so so many small females are so tenacious when it comes to climbing. So I feel like a lot of times they could get stuck, especially on something like this. They're like, well, it's a full span reach, but I'm going to figure out how to do it. So I think it's cool for them to be able to say, like, find other women, be like, oh, you're 5 foot as well, and you were able to do this move. Cool. Like, that's inspiring. I'm going to try this, and I know it's possible.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. Damn you, Juliet Hammer.
Yes.
For giving that one to Nate.
So yeah, that's that. And then my last one is kind of goes with what I've said in the past. We'll just leave it on that. It kind of goes with the whole staying psyched.
Okay.
Just the idea that, like, I wrote on this faith, like, if you know that it works for other people, you're like, hey, like, I can check this box. Like, I know that I'm going to get stronger on this. Like, and you can just kind of confidently move forward. I think there's a lot to, like, being able to trust the system.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I think that, for me, part of the trend and this new popularity for the moon board and for training, I see tons of people posting, the moon board is the ultimate training tool. All you need is a moon board. You'll get stronger. All these crazy claims. And they're all totally untrue. And I think that the people who are getting, not all the people, but some of the people who are getting psyched about training and want to go do it on the moon board just think that if I climb on a moon board, I'm training. Because that's what they're seeing everywhere. Everybody's training on a moon board. And it looks exactly like going climbing in the gym. It looks just like it in all these videos. So why would anyone think that it needs to be something different? And I don't think that climbing in the gym and training are identical things. I think they're different. So I think the moon board can be a good training tool, but I think that the trend might be hurting its chances as a training tool because people see it as a popular thing to do, to go top out boulders on it. And that's not training. So I definitely have that beef with it. And, you know, I'm a cynical dude anyway, so I have that beef with anything that's popular. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's kind of like what I said earlier. That's my big beef is it's a tool. If you, you know, just because you're climbing on the moon board doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to be doing something amazing that's beneficial to your climbing. Like, you know, if you take the same mentality, the same type of approach to the moon board that you do with everything else, like it's just going to be the same as everything else on a different angle and different holds.
Yep, for sure.
So, yeah.
One of my other beefs is the grade thing. Grades are confusing enough outside. And I just recorded a conversation last night with John Sherman, and we got into a grade debate that got a little bit heated. And I did outright accuse him of ruining climbing. And he agreed to some degree. But so grades are tough as it is. And to introduce the grading system and the community having the ability to alter those grades, that, I don't know. It's hard for me to stomach that whole part of it. I'm just not a big fan. I mean, we have people, I climbed this grade outside and this grade on a moon board, you know?
I've heard that so much.
We've heard it. And I don't care. I don't care what you climb on a moon board. You know, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're challenging yourself. So it doesn't really matter what the grade is. Grades can be used as, you know, a rough guesstimate of what you should be challenging yourself on. But I think it invites arguing about the grades. And I've seen way too much of it already. You know, so I have an issue with the whole graded problems and people being allowed to mess with those grades.
What direction do you think that that's taking things?
I don't know, really. It's just something that doesn't sit well with me. I don't have a really good way to alter that. You know, even in the engine room, we used grades, and I was never comfortable with it. Todd Skinner used to use a system, and I don't remember all of the levels, but it was like Haas and Savage, and so there were like 6 levels. You know,
Choss Beast.
And Choss Beast, yeah, that could have been one. BJ could tell. I should have reached out to BJ and gotten the levels, but those 6 levels, you know, had everything in the gym, like, and you would put one of those labels on a problem, and that's the way it stayed. You know, there was no arguing about it. That's just what it was. If it felt different to you, it felt different. But so what? It's just a word. It doesn't equate to anything you're doing outside. You know, and I think that might be more healthy than the arguing about grades. I've seen people get down about them because they've bouldered outside, you know, V6, and they get on a moon board and they fail on V3.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I fucking suck. Can't believe this." You know, it's a big downer. So
yeah, I mean, and I totally see where you're coming from on that, and it was interesting.
And this could be a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, but just specific to the moon board itself, like having climbed on it before the app, I think Adam. I wish I would have pulled up Adam Strong's quote on Facebook, because he had a little rant the other day. He was just like, things aren't the way they used to be. Everything used to be just like heinous, super hard. Boulders are put up by Englishmen who hadn't climbed outside in months because it's been raining every day. Like, and yeah, like 6E boulders or like V5 boulders were heinous. Like, I mean, they would take me like 4 and 5 sessions.
Yeah.
And it was messed up. And now it's like, Now, because it is more of a community system, like the grades have leaned away from that more so. And so they're kind of all over the place. And so they definitely, I think back then, like they were consistent, just consistently really heinous.
Yeah.
And now they're just kind of like a little more all over the place. So yeah, that I guess it does change it a little bit, you know, the more people you have. I guess in one way you could think it would be consensus, but in the other way it also creates more variance.
It's more argument, I think. I love the idea of consensus. I think that's great. If we weren't humans, because for some reason humans can't reach that. We just want to argue. That's what we do. Or some of us, like me, I love to argue. So I'll argue it even if I believe it. And there's too many of me out there to ever reach consensus.
Yeah. And there's also people like me who I'll be like, V10, I don't know, but I'll log it.
Oh, I'm logging it every time. If the guidebook says it, I'm logging it.
Yeah. If the app says V10, I'll Moonboard V10, done. Yeah, I'm not downgrading my proud sends.
And I've actually, I know you can search via the app. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know for sure. You can search via the app for the V6s that have been done the most.
Yes.
So, I think that leads to the same issue you have outside of people number hunting and going out to try to do the softest boulders they can for the grade, or the softest routes they can for the grade, because they look through the Moonboard app and they're like, oh, everybody's done this V6. I'm going to do this one. And then I'm going to post on Instagram that I just did Moonboard V6, So I think it leads to the same unhealthy problems that we're plagued with outside.
To play devil's advocate.
No way.
On this one. So for instance, if you look at V10s and Waco tanks on 8A,
yep.
What you'll get is...
First off, it's too much work on 8A to look up anything.
Yeah,
so.
You actually have to write your own program just to be able to search. You have to email Jens 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Get into a forum argument with him. And then eventually he'll tell you what the most popular V10s in Waco are.
If you set a new world record.
But I think the first one's Fern Roof, which goes anywhere between V10 and V7. And then it's power, or loaded with power. So maybe 2 of the lower end ones.
Yep.
And after that, it's, I think, Power of Silence and Full Service. So it jumps straight to pretty much the 2 hardest, but they're the most classic.
Yep.
So I think the things that are most done, it's not necessarily always the softest. There is definitely a quality aspect. I don't know if that completely reflects over to the Moonboard, but I mean, yeah, it makes sense. If I'm going to be okay, which one of these do I want to do? The one that's only been done by some guy who climbs by himself in his basement and has never actually touched rock, or the one that 40 other people have done and they all rate it 5 stars.
I don't know. If it's the Midwest, then that guy in his basement who never goes outside and never sees other humans is probably the strongest man alive.
Yeah, I don't want his V5s.
So, yeah, I don't think it's a horrible thing that it's popular. I just think that some unhealthy things can come out of it. And
yeah, I will say it's bad that it clogs my Instagram feed.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I wish there were a filter. You just filter out all Moonboard posts. Not all of them. I like the memes.
The memes.
But no, seriously.
All right. Do you have any more cons on the popularity?
Any more cons on the popularity?
Yeah.
Nope. I think that's it.
Other than, do you want the Moonboarders to stay off your lawn?
Yeah. Stay off my lawn.
Bonus questions.
So I've got a few quick rapid fire questions for you.
Do I have to rapid fire answer?
No, you don't. They're just going to be rapid fire questions, but you can answer as slowly as you want.
Okay.
All right. First, if you could
7. Oh,
no.
That was too quick.
I was trying to see if that would be a valid answer. It's not. If you could make a single change to the Moonboard itself, so just the board, what would it be?
Board including holds and all of that?
Including holds, including all of that. It just can't be the approach to how you'd climb on it.
If I were going to make one change to it, I think my change would be that there would be more variety in the holds. So some actual slopers, you know, some more open-handed pinches. More variety. I think I would keep the holds that are there, add more variety.
Yeah, that's completely fair. That's actually more or less what my exact answer was. Also, we can just skip the pockets on that. I'm kind of against pocket climbing indoors anyways. I've got these like super skinny fingers. So like, I don't know, for me, indoor pockets always feel a little silly.
Yeah, I think most people are of the same thought nowadays.
Yeah.
And
I
you don't
mean,
see them in the gym very often.
Yeah. And no one touches the pockets on the moon board for the most part. Like, you know, they may use them for feet or like as a bump hold or like every now and then, but for the most part, they're skipped over. I would much rather have slopers or just like big flat edges.
Yep. I've seen several Instagram posts of I think it's one problem. It's a hard problem and it uses a mono. And every single time I've seen someone doing that move, I see big names saying, "Oh, I just avoid that problem. I don't touch that hold," you know?
Yeah.
So.
All right. So.
Next rapid fire question.
Yeah,
please.
That's totally fair. I will actually say I would add one other thing. If it wasn't changing the holds, it would be adding small footholds in.
Oh, yeah, that's good too.
I don't know how the best method would be, but I'm not a fan of the fact that it's just the kicker board at the bottom and then a giant blank space, and then that you're just globbing your feet on these giant in-cut edges.
Yep. I don't know how this would work with the app, but something we did in the engine room that I really liked was we had a bunch of just small foot jibs that went up, you know, a third of the way up the wall, kind of just filling in a bunch of empty spaces. And you could progress the difficulty of problems by problem number one. The easiest version was use the feet on the kicker and tracking is allowed, plus the foot jibs. Problem number two is only foot jibs, no tracking, because the handholds are obviously bigger than the foot jibs. And problem number three is only foot jibs, no kicker.
Okay.
And we actually had two different we had several colors of foot jibs, but we had one set on there that was, I think, blue. And you could make it even harder by using only blue feet, you know, so there were several ways to progress the difficulty of the foot movements of a problem, which I thought was a really cool way to use it.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard of that before. I do like that. So that would actually, I'll let you have other holds, and I'll take foot chips of some kind, just back ones.
Yep.
So next question. If you only had a moon board to train on, let's say you're a weekend warrior, you sport climb, you're not close enough that you can climb outside on the weekdays, how would you approach your training?
Ooh, damn, I only had a moon board to train on?
Yup.
Where do I live? Like, what's my nearest outdoor? Do I get out on the weekends?
I feel like we always say Red River Gorge, so let's go somewhere else. Let's say you live in Colorado.
Damn it.
Yeah, I'm sorry for you.
So, do I get to go climb outside on the weekends?
Yeah, you can go outside and maybe like rifle, maybe, I don't know, shelf if that's a thing worth doing.
Let's talk rifle.
Yeah, let's do rifle.
I think I would spend my first cycle or my first phase, my first, month or 2 months maybe, dialing in all of the problems I could do, and finding ones that I really liked and really enjoyed, so that they were a little lower intensity. Mm-hmm. And I would just get a ton of volume in and learn the style. And then I would start, oh boy, this is hard off the top of my head. I'm so used to looking at building it on an app now. And then I think I would have alternate days. Maybe I would start with 2 days a week of really high intensity projecting. And the way I would warm up for that is by using the boulders that I had dialed in earlier in my previous phase and using those for movement practice, specifically tension practice. So rather than jumping, I would force myself to try and keep my feet on, try and learn to use the footholds that are in funky orientations, because that's definitely a weakness of mine is if I don't have a foothold to push down on, if I'm having to pull on it from the side or something like that with my toes, that's a little harder for me. So I would gravitate towards those problems and, just try to learn to use those feet in my warm-ups and then go to really hard limit bouldering. And then I would have probably a day a week where I did a circuit of some sort of the easier problems. And
is that when you would add in kind of the new boulders that from the app?
Like the new boulders that are being done? Or
just in general, like would you during that week introduce any new boulders?
I don't know if I would. I think I would limit myself to the new boulders that I learned in my first phase.
Okay.
And then just go into physical training and deep practice sort of mode for my next couple of phases. And then, take a period of just trying to perform outside with 1 day a week of training, hard bouldering on the moon board, and then I'd go back to doing more new boulders. Maybe switch up my whole dialed in circuit, so to speak.
Okay.
So what would you do?
Where am I climbing at?
Let's say you are in...
Don't say Moab.
You're in Vitavu.
Oh God.
No.
I quit rock climbing.
What's another good popular area that we probably have a lot of people listening in? Let's say you're
could also be bouldering.
Yeah, it could be bouldering, couldn't it? Let's go that you've done this, so let's talk about it. You're a southeastern boulder. So you're in the Chattanooga area. You're familiar with that.
Yeah. So I guess, what was different with that was I also was able to climb in the gym and like on regular boulders as well.
Right. But now you're not.
But now I'm not. So
you work a full-time job at Amazon where you never see the light of day and don't get to speak to any other humans all day long.
All right.
Unless they're yelling at you for something.
Yeah.
And so you're not out in time to go to the gyms. All the gyms are closed when you have free time. So you have to train on your moon board in your damp, cold basement.
But except for it's Paul Corsaro's damp, cold basement because that's where I was living this winter and that's where I trained.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, it sounds oddly familiar. Yeah, okay. If I was climbing outside, I guess it would depend on what I want to train for. But, I've always been a bit like I've spent so much time in the South that I feel comfortable with like traditional Southern style. Like horse pens for me has always been like a comfort zone, where Little Rock City, where it's more like hard pulling between edges, has been a lot more difficult. So yeah, I'd say I'd honestly stick with what I was doing. Like just try really hard, like straightforward tic-tacking crimp moves, really focus on my movement.
Yep.
With my warm-ups, I'd circuit on the bigger holds, probably do the exact same thing what you said, and this is what I did in the past, was I would have a handful of boulders that I really liked, but they would be more intended as jump boulders, and I would try and see just how spanned I could get. So like really pull hard with my legs, keep toe down in moves that would be harder to keep my feet on than jump for, and I would just practice doing those. Like, so that would be my warm-up. Yeah, I'd circuit on like really hard crimp boulders, especially because climbing outside in the South, you're on a lot larger holds. It's normally like more circus tricky or like just powerful climbing.
Yep.
So for me, I would use this not to train for climbing outside there as much as like to make myself more well-rounded.
Gotcha.
And then when climbing outside, depending on the season, when it's like on kind of the shoulder season, so like spring and fall, while it's maybe still a little bit warmer, just try and get a ton of volume in outside so that I really get comfortable with that style. And then in the winter, just really focus down on what I want to try and send. And one thing I've done in the past with the moon board, and so let's say it is peak season, it's January, it's perfect. The nice thing with the moon board is because all the holds stay the exact same, and there's enough variance in them, like side pulls, down pulls, and it's gridded off evenly enough. You can simulate moves so well on that thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
So if I have a specific move I want to do, what I like to do is I'll just make a slightly easier version of it. And I'll just like replicate that move and try it a bunch, really like dial in that body positioning. And I don't worry so much about like, oh, well, outside it's a 2-finger pocket with like a good thumb catch and things like that. It's like, how does my body move through that space?
Yep.
And for me, for me, that kind of training has always been really beneficial, as long as I take it low key enough. Let's say if I was trying to do the opening move of God module, if I make a move that's even harder and try it on the moon board all week, and then I go on the weekend, like I'm just going to get crushed because I'm going to be wrecked. But if I do something that's easier, I can kind of get a feel for it, that would be a really weird one to set.
Yeah. Though if you were going to set the opening move of God module, the moon board is probably the best simulator for it.
Yeah, just smear on the blank wall.
Yeah.
So that's how I would approach it. I would use, just because I'm comfortable with that style already, like climbing outside in the Southeast, I would use the moon board to continue working my weaknesses and just be really powerful. And then on the weekends, climb a ton of volume in the seasons that aren't peak, so I can build a nice base, just get really comfortable. And then in the peak season, just really focus on what I want to get done.
Yep. Cool.
And then, so that was those two. Last question. If you could make a single suggestion to people who are climbing on the moon board and to how they should be approaching their climbing, what would it be?
I have to narrow this down to one. Shit. Okay. I think that what I would tell people to do is to not, and this goes for almost everyone in the gym, but specifically the moon board, because that's what we're talking about here, and because it definitely does lend itself to a really particular style. I would say don't just allow yourself to jump and send boulders. I think if you want to do the boulder that way, if you want to send it, great. Take your video, post it up on the Instagrams, but then go back and force yourself to do it better, to keep your feet on. Sometimes jumping is the answer. Sometimes that's the way, but you can't know that if that's the way you always do it. You have to go through and learn to do it with body tension, keeping your feet on as best you can, before you can make the judgment that cutting your feet is the most efficient, best way to do it. So that's what I would tell people. Don't be satisfied with how you do it the first time and then move on. Instead, try to make it better.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's, something we both we talk a lot about in our clinics.
Yeah.
Is, the top.
We preach it for sure.
Yeah, the top isn't always the goal. Like, you're not just going for completion points. If you're outside, by all means, completion points. But yeah, in your training and in your practice, like, and this is what my recommendation would be: move like you care.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
Don't just pull on and like knowing how to try hard is very important. That's a very important skill to have. But if all you ever do is go in, knuckle down, and just jump between edges, like, are you really getting better? And also, I mean, frankly, if your feet can cut on every single hold, like, is it really that hard?
Right.
Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like it probably feels strenuous and difficult, but I don't know. Outside, like, there aren't that many boulders where I can dead hang every single position on an entire boulder and complete it. Like, for me, that was actually a huge, I actually remember when that switch started to happen, because for the longest time, like when I would be doing these big moves, I would like, when I first started climbing, I would like go for these moves and I like try and hit a hold and I'd fall. And then I'd be like, oh, this is ridiculous, because I could just like grab the holds and do a pull up on them.
Right.
I'd be like, I can hang these holds. I just like can't reach up and slap to them. And now it's like, man, there's times a lot of moves I have to have someone else like boost me into them just so I can get on the wall and then do the next move. Like, the fuck if I can even dead hang these holds? I can barely pull on with like both hands and a foot.
Right. Yeah. You have to have all your body tension working just to stay in position. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of, exactly. And like, there's a lot of moves that like I have to climb into them just so that like I can recruit that body tension.
Yep.
So yeah, I think, if you're always just climbing on moves that you can jump between, I don't think that's that applicable. So my recommendation is move like you care. Like, really pay attention to what you're doing. Like, do moves that challenge you in different ways. Like, you should be doing moves that if your feet cut, you're off.
Yep, totally. And I like that. I think we're going to have to use that phrase, move like you care. I like it. So you guys will be seeing that more and more and more. Maybe clogging up your Instagram feeds.
Closing statements.
Yeah, I think that the moon board is a good tool. I won't argue that it's a bad tool. I think that if it's used as such, then it's definitely a really good training tool. The problem is that most people aren't using it as such. I think most people are just using it due partly to the trending popularity that rewards topping boulders, which is performance. I think that people are using it as a performance tool, and that's not a training tool necessarily. And, I think it's a really effective tool for the dedicated, focused user. And more common, though, I think it's used as a poor substitute for real rock climbing. And I think that you should just go rock climbing more if that's what you're looking for. I'm a fan of the idea, the concept. Again, and I know I sound like I'm harping on this, but it's being destroyed by its own popularity, I think. At least its effectiveness for most people, and the need to sell it, which I totally understand. Hype it up, sell it. I totally get it. I'm in the same boat sometimes, so I understand the issue. But for me, frankly, I'd rather have a good old Woody with just a bunch of random holds, and people can come through and set problems, and it's a more intimate thing for me. So I think that's the way I would go. While I'm definitely excited to climb on the moon board some this summer and this winter when I'm in Lander. There's one in Lander at the Junker's house, and I'm stoked to go over there and climb on it. For me, the Woody will always be the better option, and real boulders. I can't forget about those.
Yeah.
So that's my rambling closing thought.
All right.
How about you?
Man, when it comes down to it, it's a tool. Like, just like anything else, it's only as good as what you put into it. And so I think for a lot of people, it can be really beneficial if they're focused enough. And that's what it really comes down to. Like, if you know what you need to work on, I think you can really get a ton out of this tool. It definitely has its flaws. Just about everything will. But I think for a lot of people, it can be really great, especially for people who climb alone, or they're very isolated, or for instance, they just only climb in one area. Like, if you only climb in Rifle or only climb in Smith or the Red,
yep. This
is nice because it shows you things that you may not have known. Like, it'll have different types of climbing styles. So yeah, I think it's a work in process, and especially I think anything that's moving this fast will always have growing pains, but yep. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to see what he comes up with next, and yeah, cool.
All right.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I took this conversation, I sent it over to Ben Moon, and then we Skyped in so that I could get Ben's opinions on our conversation. Hey, Ben, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I got you. Perfect.
Does that sound all right?
It does. That's great. How was France?
Oh, yeah, it was great. Really good. Oh, yeah, I wish I was still out there.
Yeah, I bet. Weather was good?
Yeah, had a couple of rainy days, but yeah, generally it was good. Didn't stop us climbing, so yeah.
Yeah. Force you to rest anyway.
Say again, force you to rest. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. How long were you out there? Like a week? 2
Yeah,
weeks?
like 9 days in total. So climbed for about 7 days, I think, and a couple of rest days.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's
We climbed at a place called Saint-Léger in Provence, which is, I climbed there about 10 years ago for like a few days, but there's just so much there. It's just like massive.
Oh, cool. Is it mostly steep stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not much easy stuff. It's sort of like sort of French sort of 7s and above, really. Sort of high 6s and 7s and 8s, really. It's good for. But yeah, a lot of steep stuff, big sort of big caves and tufas, and pretty varied, really. Lots of different stuff, but yeah, generally fairly steep.
Yeah, I thought I had seen a bunch of photos that showing that it was pretty steep. Looks amazing out there.
Pretty long as well. Sort of, I think there's some sort of 20-meter routes, but most of it's 20 to sort of 35 meters. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Have you just run out of stuff in your home area? Is there more for you?
It's just a bit depressing back here. I mean, there's some good routes in sport climbing in the UK, but compared to Europe, it's really not got a patch.
Yeah.
So there's stuff to do here, but it's hard and not super good quality for me. But no, I've definitely got some unfinished business here.
Oh, good. It's good to have that. Keep you motivated.
Are you still in Waco?
I am, yeah. Nate had to leave a little early, but I'm still here with my fiance, Annalisa, and we're here for just a couple more days, and then we're out. We've been here a month and a half, so it's been a good trip.
Yeah, get some stuff done?
Yeah, this is my first trip to Waco, so it's
okay. Right.
It's really fun. I've never been much of a boulderer, but trying to learn.
Yeah. What's it like these days with the sort of guiding stuff?
It's not as bad as everybody says. It's pretty simple, and actually it's pretty empty. There's not been a single day that we didn't have reservations and were turned away. Like every day we want to get in, there's plenty of spots to get in. And it's during the week, it's a ghost town around here. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So did you have a chance to listen to the episode?
I did, yes. Yeah, I thought it was good. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun listening to it all, and sort of, I was thinking, I want to say stuff, but anyway, yeah. It was good.
Okay, I got a couple of quick questions for you before we kind of get into the 3 main topics that Nate and I talked about.
Yes.
First question, what do you think is the best way for homeowners to kind of scale their board when it doesn't fit? Is there a preferred method? Yeah,
I thought you might ask that, and I was just discussing that with a couple of guys who I work with and stuff. I personally think, and I like having a bit of a kickboard. So, well, I just got an email the other day from a woman who wanted to fit it into a 9-foot high room. And I just did some simple maths and everything. And I think you need to, because we work in metric over here, I think you need to lose about 50 centimeters off the current moon board. So personally, I would chop the kickboard, take 10 centimeters maybe off the kickboard. So that's about 6 inches, I suppose.
Okay.
And then I would probably try and work out how much you need to reduce the spacing between each row of T-nuts. There's 18 rows of T-nuts on a moon board. I think it would be good to keep all of those 18 rows, but just reduce the spacing. So, for example, if you reduce the spacing by 1 inch across those 18 rows, you've reduced it by 18 inches overall. Now, obviously, that's at an angle, so I don't know how that affects the height. It presumably needs a bit of geometry, but that's what I would do.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense because if you're coming out with another set of holds that's going to fill the board, then you definitely don't want to lose a row.
I don't think you want to lose rows. And, if you lose a couple of inches between each rows, it's just going to make the problems a bit easier, but you're still going to have, you're still going to be able to climb the problems, kind of like they were set. I mean, the other thing you could do is you could just tweak the angle a little bit, make it a little bit steeper, maybe make it 45 degrees as opposed to 40 degrees. That would gain you a little bit. I mean, the moon board that I've got at the schoolroom is actually on an adjustable winch, and I have played around a little bit with the angle, and because most of the holds are pretty positive, a few degrees actually doesn't make that much difference. to the grade of to the grade of some of the problems anyway. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would reduce the kickboard and then reduce the spacing and maybe make it a little bit steeper.
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise, and I think if you're stronger, maybe making it steeper is a better option, and if you're on the lower end of the grades on the moon board, then maybe crunching it down a little bit and trying to fit it in at the same angle is a better option. So
yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, and a quick question about the new holds that you guys are coming out with. Will the next wall set require having all the new holds?
Well, no. The next setup will be so there's obviously 140 holds, existing holds, and there's 198 T-nuts on a moon board. So the next setup's going to be 50 new resin holds, 32 new wooden system board holds, and then the rest, which I think is, I can't remember the maths now, but it's about 100. Well, it's almost all of the existing 140 holds, I think, less about 20.
Okay. So the next setup will have the new holds on it?
Yes, it will, yeah.
Okay. And why'd you decide to go partly wood?
Well, I've been climbing on some wooden. Well, we have wooden holds on training boards. The first training boards we built, 20 years ago, had wooden holds on, and I've just been working on a range of wooden holds for the moon board, just because I thought it'd be nice to have a set of wooden holds on the moon board, and well, they're actually system holds because there's like 16 unique shapes, and each got their mirror image.
Right.
But they're a little bit different to the sort of system board holds that I've seen out there, which tend to be very sort of geometrical shapes. These are more like climbing holds, resin climbing holds, but they're made out of wood, made out of plywood, and they're CNC'd, and they're really nice to climb on. We've had them up at the schoolroom for the sort of last 6 months. So yeah, just thought it'd mix it up a little bit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing those. I really like climbing on wood.
Eventually, maybe in a couple of years' time, I could see having an all wood setup on the moon board. But one of the reasons the moon board's working so well at the moment, I think, and why there's 5,000 problems on there is because we have that one setup. So everyone around the world is working off the same setup,
right,
and adding problems to that setup. As soon as we start, if we dilute the setups and have lots of different setups, you're just splitting everyone. We'll be climbing on different setups, and I don't think it'll work so well. Yeah,
I agree. I think that's one of the cooler aspects of it, is that everyone gets to climb on the same wall and can see what everyone else is doing on the same wall. So
I don't want to sort of do things too quickly. And there's no, I have a plan to bring out these new 50 resin holds, but there's no plan to bring out any more resin holds. I think. Okay. Not in the near future, anyway.
Okay, so it's not going to be like new holds every set that people have to buy.
No, definitely not.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear.
Definitely.
One last question before we kind of dive in here. You're having a 25-degree board and a 40-degree board, and the new freestanding wall goes to both angles, right?
Yeah, that's right. You talked about that. Yeah, so the freestanding one can be set at either 25 or 40, but it has to be, it's not an adjustable wall. It has to be built either at the 25 or the 40.
Oh, okay, so you can't change it between the two. You just keep it at one.
You can't change between, not without taking it down, which is like a two-person job, for half a day or something. So it's not fully adjustable. It's too complicated.
Gotcha. So when you come out with the 25-degree moon board, is it going to be the same wall setup as the 40-degree board?
It would be the same setup, yeah. So each existing problem could be then climbed again at 25 degree.
Okay, and then are you going to have grades adjusted in the app for whichever angle you're on? Or
adjusted in the app, exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that'll be a good feature for people. Not everybody's outdoor climbing is as steep as 40 degrees. Most people's is probably closer to 25. So
yeah, I agree.
Cool. Awesome. You want to dive into the 3 topics, or do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, not really. I mean, there was a few things I noticed you mentioned. Well, one of the things was the price of the holds.
Okay.
I know a few people have commented on that, and I actually think they're really good value for money. they're like $600, approximately about $600 for 140 holds, which is, well, less than $5 per hold, which is probably comparable in price to other holds out there. But the thing with the Moonboard holds is that, they're supported by the Moonboard and the app and everything. Yep. So you're getting a lot more than just a basic hold, yet the price of the holds are comparable to, other holds out there that, aren't supported by like a database of 5,000 problems. So yeah, I just wanted to say I thought they're really good value for money. I know shipping is a bit high, but again, even with the shipping, I still think they actually do represent pretty good value for money. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, I did a price breakdown of a bunch of other companies as well. And with the shipping, it comes in at about the same level as a lot of the higher end holds in the US if we were to buy them here. So, and then you're right, you get the Moonboard, you get the community, you get the app, you get all those set problems already. So they do come in about the same after shipping. So yeah, I don't think they're a rip-off by any means.
No.
So I didn't want it to sound like that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but just one other thing, actually. I think number of Moonboards in the US. Did I say 1,000? I thought I said worldwide it was like 1,000 plus. I didn't think I said 1,000 in the US.
Oh, okay. I might have been confused then.
Yeah, I think it's 1,000 plus worldwide, not 1,000 in the US.
Okay, gotcha. That sounds more like what I would have expected at this point. But you guys are exploding, so who knows? They could be all over.
Yeah,
the place.
No, it's gone well over the past year.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm more than anything. Even though I'm definitely averse to having the same post on my social media feeds all the time, which is a great thing for you guys.
Well, it's nothing to do with me, that is it?
No, not at all. But people are loving it. So
people out there, So, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, you got to remember also that I've been doing the Moonboard for about 10 years now. So,
right.
It's taken a while to sort of really get going.
Yeah. Was it surprising to you that it just kind of jumped off recently like that?
No, not really. Once we developed the app and we built the new website and we put that new setup, I could see that it was going to make a massive difference. Just having everyone climbing on the same setup. Initially, we had a lot of people complaining that we had archived all the old setups, but within like a few weeks, obviously people had reset their Moonboard to the new setup and started like climbing problems, and it's worked really well. That.
Yeah, one of my initial issues with it was there was no standard setup. Like if you wanted to climb a specific problem, you might have to reset your wall to the way that set was done, climb through those problems, and then reset your wall again.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the idea of having it set up the same way for a long time. That's the style I prefer on a Woody anyway. So it works well with the Moonboard.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the good things. I mean, one other thing I was going to comment on was the grades thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do that now or later or whatever, but I was just going to say, because you discussed the grades issue, and I mean, all I would say about grades is, and it's the same sort of whether you're training indoors or outdoors. I mean, you might not like or agree, but I do think they are like a necessity, really.
Yep.
And particularly on the Moonboard and with the sort of developments that we're working on. I mean, the grade is basically just a sort of a measure of intensity, really, and all training, is about sort of intensity and volume and everything. So, you do need grades on the Moonboard, and we've introduced this benchmark problems, which are basically benchmark problems at certain grades.
Okay.
With a view to for people to be able to use those benchmarks, to work out what level they are climbing on the Moonboard, and then tailor training programs, Moonboard training programs based on their benchmarks.
Okay, cool. I wasn't aware that those existed. Can you look through the app and just find the benchmarks?
There's about 40 benchmark problems from 6B plus up to 7C.
Okay. Cool.
And they're sort of what we think are sort of benchmarks at the grade.
Yeah, I think that's good to have. You know, I tell all my clients who are climbing outdoors in the areas that I'm familiar with what I think the benchmarks are in those areas, that they should go climb those things so that they feel like they can be fairly solid at that grade.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, it's great. And yeah, like I agree with you. Climbing out, having benchmarks outside, is a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on it a little bit in your podcast, but climbing walls, obviously they change their routes every 4 to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have any benchmarks at climbing walls to measure yourself. And what we've had at the schoolroom, we've got the same sort of training board that we've had for 20 years. And you can use all the problems there as benchmarks to see how you're doing. And it's the same with the moon board now. You've got benchmarks on there to see how you're progressing and everything.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good idea. Well, let's dive into this really quick then. And we may have talked about some of these things already, but just in case there are some things that pop into your head. Topic number 1 was the pros and cons of the moon board as a training tool. You have any notes or thoughts on what Nate and I?
No, I haven't made any notes, but okay. I mean, all I would say is that, the moon board's kind of based on, the old training boards that we used to climb on at the school. So they're just a very simple flat paneled bouldering wall with very simple holds on it. And, I personally think that, I think that's the best form of sort of strength training really for climbing. And I think the moon board's a very effective strength training tool.
Yeah.
That's probably all I would say about that. I mean, there's lots of ways to train for climbing, and there's tons of different equipment and different exercises you can do and everything. But I still think, bouldering is, the best form of training really. And I think bouldering on something like a moon board, which is fairly basic, is the best form of training really. A lot of the climbing walls these days, they go for a sort of a comp style problem. There's lots of sort of big volumes, heel hooks, funky moves and everything, which, obviously it depends what you're training for, but, personally I'm training to do stuff outside, and I find something like the moon board or those basic training boards more applicable to climbing outside than, the comp style problems really.
Yep. And I'm glad you said it, depends on what you're training for. If you're training for the roofs here in Waco that have tons of heel hooks and toe hooks and things like that, then, the moon board's not the most effective tool. But like you said, it's a tool, and it is a really great tool for that specific style, I think. What's your take on slopers, like having big slopers? The moon board doesn't really have any, so I'm just curious, what's your take on this?
I think that would be probably hard to do on the moon board. The new range of 50 olds does have some slopers on it and some pinches and stuff, some really nice ones. But the moon board's only a small training board, and I think it's set at 40 degrees. I think it's going to be, a little bit limited maybe for slopers, possibly.
Okay. And that's, I think, honestly, that's something that gyms, especially in the U.S., are setting more and more and more with. I think the amount of sloper problems in gyms in the U.S. is far above the fingery problems. So, if you're going to a commercial gym, you get plenty of slopers. And I think you're right. The fingery nature of the moon board is, a really great training tool for outside. How do your training sessions look if you're on a moon board? Is it, how often do you send hard problems versus just work on them?
Well, to be honest, I don't send that many hard problems in training very often, because, I am following like a sort of training program, and most of the sort of training I do is like some form of interval training, and it'll be below my sort of maximum level. So it's more sort of volume based, I would say.
Okay.
So I'd say the hardest I sort of send on a moon board is probably 7C plus. But I'd say it's more around the sort of 7B plus to 7C range.
Yep. And you're training for sport climbing right now.
I'm training for sport climbing, yeah.
Okay. Okay. What if you were training for bouldering? Just throw some things
if I
out
was
there.
training for bouldering, then yeah, I would do a lot more limit bouldering, which I don't really sort of do at the moment. I'd still do sort of interval training, but probably maybe like 80% of my max or something.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd probably warm up, maybe do 10 to 15 warm up problems and then project for, 45 minutes or something, and then leave it at that really.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's a good answer. Any other thoughts on it as a training device? And I mean, I think you stated your opinion, so.
Well, I think it's got a lot of potential.
I agree.
Basically, looking at the sort of developments that we're working on, the interval timers and the benchmarks, and putting that all together into some kind of package, I think could be really beneficial to moonboard users and coaches as well. We're looking at basically the lists feature. I think is really nice in the app, so you can create lists of problems. So they could be benchmark problems or problems at a certain grade, and then you can apply a timer to those problems. So then it will just scroll through those problems. So it's effectively, you're creating like a training routine for yourself. And I don't see why coaches couldn't create a training routine and then send that to their clients and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty great feature.
A lot of possibilities, really.
Yeah. We kind of talked about the pros and cons for the home user, and you gave us your opinion on the best way to fit it into a smaller area. We talked about the price. Unless you have any thoughts on that, we can move on to the trending aspect of it.
Yeah, let's move on to that.
Okay, and we definitely touched on this, that you weren't really surprised because you guys were, sort of building it in that direction, and I think that's great that you took those steps. I know it kind of seemed from the outside like it was just sort of languishing there, and no one was catching on to what this great concept was. Keeping up with this trend, are you afraid that it could get watered down at all?
Well, no. I mean, I hadn't really considered that until I sort of listened to you two speaking. But I don't know. I mean, that's just the way of the world, isn't it now?
Sure.
I mean, the internet's changed everything, really. Well, it's changed a lot of things in climbing. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, it didn't really exist. But I mean, if people go to Fontainebleau and they want to climb problems, they just look online for sequences and, watch people climb the problems. Then they go and do the problems. And it's the same with the moonboard, really, I suppose. People are, filming themselves doing problems and then, posting it to Instagram or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know. I think, it doesn't bother me really. I think it's nice. And, I often look at, moonboard Instagram posts to see how someone's climbed a problem, see if they did it the same way as me or whatever. Okay.
And you guys don't have any plans to sort of, make it more accessible to the, V1, V2 climber? Not that there's anything wrong with being a V1, V2 climber, but I think as a more advanced training tool, with limited space, if you started putting big enough holds on there for V1 and V2, you'd end up watering it down. So there's no plans for that at the moment, no. Okay, so the new sets are going to be fairly difficult holds as well.
They're fair. I would say there's a few more bigger holds on there, definitely.
Okay.
We definitely conscious decision whether that's going to allow problems below font 6B plus on the moonboard. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'll certainly help with warming up, I think.
Yeah, it'll definitely help with warming up a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on the trend, the popularity of it? I mean, you guys must be working your asses off over there.
No, not really, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, obviously, I'm very happy about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I imagine.
I've not I don't really sort of feel like I've sort of publicised the moon board that much. It's just sort of happened naturally, really.
Yeah.
And I'm psyched about that.
Yeah, I'm psyched for you. I mean, huge congratulations on that. It's cool to see somebody putting a really valid training tool out there that people are catching on to the way they are with the moon board. You did say something early on in our emailing when I told you that I was going to be arguing against the moon board in our conversation. You sent me a quote to read if we couldn't get you on the podcast. And in it, you say the moon board is no silver bullet and should ideally be used in conjunction with other climbing training systems. However, if you believe as I do that bouldering on a basic angled training board is the single best thing you can do to improve your climbing level, then building a moon board will be a big step on the road to fulfilling your potential. And I think that's a huge statement, and I think it's great that you didn't say the moon board is the only tool you need, just buy the moon board, that you said it's just part of a bigger system. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think I'm a sort of fairly honest, person, and, I wouldn't want to sort of mislead anyone about anything. And yeah, I think, what you just read out there, what I wrote to you, yeah, I stand by that. And, moonboard isn't like, a silver bullet, but, and if you really want to get good at climbing, you need to probably, you need to obviously work very hard, but, follow some kind of structured training program. And yeah, I do a lot of bouldering, not just on the moon board. I climb at, the Foundry Climbing Wall in Sheffield and, other boards at the schoolroom. I do dead hanging and campus board and, I do some ring stuff. So, I'm doing a lot of different stuff. They're all good, but I probably would say, as I already said, that I do think bouldering is probably, the single best thing you can do. I mean, it's very time consuming training, and there is tons of different stuff out there, tons of different bits of kits you can, train on. And, very few people have the time to do all of those things. So you've got to give up certain things. But the last thing I would probably give up is like sort of hard bouldering on some kind of, flat panel training board like the moon board. I think that's the best thing you can use, really. Yeah,
I agree. And when I was, initially preparing to do this podcast and was coming up with why I was going to be against the moon board, it occurred to me that I'm one of the few people out there. I won't say the few people, but I know a lot about training, and I can sort of dial down what I need to do and what all is just superfluous things that I don't really need in my training program. But a lot of people out there can't do that. They get tons and tons of information, and there are so many different ways to train and so many tools to use for training that it just becomes this impossible sea to wade through. But something like the moon board is, it's a pretty simple tool that it's tough to really go wrong. You could use it better, I'm sure, but it's tough to go wrong with it. So yeah, I'll definitely concede that.
Yeah. I mean, no, I totally agree. I mean, training generally is just incredibly complicated. And like you say, there is a lot of information out there now, way more than there was 20 years ago. And it can be a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah, and some of it's conflicting information,
Yeah, exactly.
But the one thing I think everyone agrees on is exactly what you said, that just hard bouldering on a few moves at a time, really hard moves, is definitely the best training you can do. Yeah.
It's very versatile as well, bouldering in general, as a form of sort of training, because, you can just vary the intensity of what you're doing, and that changes everything really. So it's great for sort of strength, but likewise it's good for strength, endurance, and even endurance.
Yep. Okay. Any other points you wanted to make while I've got you on here?
No, I don't think that's probably about it really. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us, and I appreciate all the years of inspiration for training that you've brought to all of us. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, that's the schoolroom is kind of the holy grail of training. So I love what you guys did there.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing the sort of podcast as well. You know, it's it was great.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for being on, Ben. I appreciate it.
Okay, cheers, Chris.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Devil's Advocate from the Power Company podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app, and please share us on your social medias. You can find us on the Facebooks, the Pinterests, and the Instagrams. Wait, why are we on Pinterest? But never on the Twitters, because, well...
We don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build.